Hello, everyone. This is a webinar to present some of the results of the camera monitoring that occurred last May and July on the Moore Islands. My name is David Bradley. I'm the director of the British Columbia Office for Birds Canada. And for those of you who don't know Birds Canada, we are a national not-for-profit organization with presence in most provinces. And our mandate is to conserve wild birds and their habitat through a range of different things, mostly involving people and the interaction between people and birds and bird conservation. Some of the work we were interested in doing on the Moore Islands was some camera trapping work to assess the presence of invasive alien species and general wildlife on those islands in partnership with the Kitasoo Xailas Guardians, the Great Bear Initiative of the Coastal First Nations, Environment Canada, and obviously Birds Canada. So this project was all about invasive alien species. Now, in the case of these islands, I'm most interested in these species of mammals because many of the bird species for which the Moore Islands are an important breeding area are affected by mammals. On other islands in the British Columbia coast, as on many oceanic islands, birds are highly affected by invasive mammals, primarily because they have evolved in isolation without the presence of these mammals, and so they don't know how to defend themselves against these voracious predator species. And these mammals can be a range of different species, from rats in the top left there to raccoons, which are a big issue in Haida Gwaii, to stoats in the bottom there, to feral cats, such as that lovely kitty in the bottom left, and weasels like the one on the top right, which is a big problem in New Zealand, or stoats as they're known. In other islands, mice are a big issue. A good example of that, this horrific image here of an albatross taken on Marion Island in the southern Indian Ocean, shows the sort of effect that invasive mammals can have on breeding seabirds. This poor adult bird didn't know what was killing it, what was eating it alive, exposing its brain, and just feasting on it. And it didn't really flinch. And these birds are sort of sitting on their nest, not anticipating this. And these mammals can have an impact on many other species as well. The stoat you see in the top left there can feed on other seabirds. And the mammal on the bottom left there readily feeds on songbirds on various islands. There are islands in New Zealand, such as the Stephens Island, where cats are directly responsible for the extinction of several species. Unfortunately, that's the case in many oceanic islands with invasive mammals. So we really want to determine what mammals are present on some of the islands off the coast, central coast near Klemtu. As you can see there, Klemtu on the right-hand side of this image, and the Moore Islands on the left-hand side. The reason I was interested in the Moore Islands is because this has been identified as an important bird area by BirdLife International. It's also a provincial wildlife management area as well. And that's because of the abundance of breeding seabirds on those islands, whether those are rhinoceros auklets or leeches or fork-tailed storm petrels or black oyster catchers, for example, all breed in relative safety on these islands. It's one of the reasons why they're so abundant there. And they're identified as being islands at threat from invasive mammals. And so we're able to obtain some funding to conduct this camera work on those islands in collaboration with the Kitasoo Xailas Guardian Watchman. So this zoomed in image of the Moore Islands. You can see it consists of hundreds of little islands and islets. I've never been there before. I don't know how many of you have necessarily been there before. I would love to go. Hopefully I can get back out there on the next trip when they go out. These rugged islands are home to many, many seabirds. We didn't know what mammals you find in those islands, and we definitely found some interesting results from this. So the Guardians went out there and placed 5 cameras on different islands. They set them up around the General Moore Islands area. And these islands, these cameras are infrared trail cameras, much like hunters use. And they're triggered by an infrared beam that comes out the front of the camera that's invisible to all mammals. It doesn't have any glow, so mammals don't see it, doesn't make any noise. As the mammals pass in front of it, it triggers the camera or video that fires a number of different photos or or videos. So it's very useful for detecting mammal species that generally would be quite wary and shy and not be seen by many people. But the cameras are great at capturing images of these sorts of animals. The first camera number 10, set up there looking to the east, across to Aristizabal Island, I think that's how you pronounce it. Was set up on a log, and all these cameras were baited with sardine cans. The Guardians hammered a nail through the can, so all the juices leaked out onto the log that they were placed, and that attracted a lot of animals. The hope was that if there were any mammals around, that it would readily attract them. And it's also quite useful for attracting birds. This is a northwestern crow, as you can see walking across the log, and a raven with a much more bulky beak, much larger bird, also seen crossing the log there. And at nighttime, you have birds such as the bald eagle visiting. Whether that bird was actually visiting the island because the can of sardines were there and that attracted it, or whether it just happened to land on that log, I'm not sure. But they've been captured on these cameras. And so over 6 to 7 days of deployment, this camera captured 132 different photos, which show the presence of 3 different bird species: the northwestern crow, the common raven, and the bald eagle. The next camera 13, was placed near what turned out to be a large storm petrel colony, very well placed. And this storm petrel colony was visited by all the storm petrels at night when they would return from their foraging trips during the day out in the ocean, and they'd land on this island and enter their burrows, which are underneath all that vegetation. And you can see there are multiple individual storm petrels visiting throughout the night as they land on the island and find their burrow and enter to either to incubate the eggs and switch with their partners, or to bring food to chicks in the burrows. Of course, this attracts predators, which is what we were hoping to gather information on with the cameras. And this image down here, you can see it's rather blurry. The next photo showed it to be a storm petrel being eaten by a river otter. You see those tiny little ears on this big hairy animal. And that was really revealing, showing a river otter feeding on storm petrels. I didn't know they did that. In the literature, I found that it's known, but not that well known. It's probably known. Coastal communities up and down the British Columbia coast probably know this quite well. It was a revelation to me, however. We also saw examples of predation by another species. And on the right-hand side, you can see a round egg and the beak of a raven. This bird obviously took an egg out of a burrow and proceeded to eat it. So it's an interesting predation event of a seabird by a native predator, such as ravens. And then another predation event which occurred when, right in front of the camera, this falcon, peregrine falcon, landed. We have to look at what species it was actually feeding on. It's difficult to tell from this image. It could very well be a songbird that was there on the island. This photo was taken at 5 o'clock in the morning, so it could very well be a songbird, or it could have been one of the storm petrels that was leaving its burrow when it was captured by the peregrine falcon. It's likely this peregrine falcon is what's known as a Peel's peregrine falcon, a different subspecies that occurs on the coast of British Columbia. There's large colonies around Haida Gwaii and on the central coast as well. Very interesting finding, and again, we didn't know this beforehand, so it's very good to know it now. So that camera, number 13, showed over 72 days, 4,300 photos. That's a lot of photos. The only mammal was a river otter and some different mammal species evident there. Camera 11 was deployed only 24 days, captured nearly 3,000 photos. So again, many photos. No mammals seen on this camera, only eagles, auklets, ravens, and storm petrels. And those are captured as the sardine can was placed up against the Sitka spruce there, and you can see a raven, large beak in front of the camera there, and more storm petrels, blurry images taken as they fly past. Obviously, there were some burrows around there they were visiting at night, much like the other site. And a bald eagle showed up one night as well. They seem to be quite omnipresent on these locations. Next camera was on, let's go back there for a second. So those 3 cameras were all on the smaller outer islands. They all had quite a few bird species. The only mammal species on those 3 cameras was the river otter, which is basically an aquatic species. However, the 2 cameras that were placed on the main Moore Island there show quite a different story with more land-based mammals, as opposed to the smaller islands, which only showed 1 marine-based mammal. One of those cameras on the main Moore Islands, again, was placed on the log, and this was very well placed because it captured many different species. In the middle there, you have a savanna sparrow that showed up with a streaky chest and the yellow eye stripe. I didn't know that they occurred on this island. That's really interesting information. And of course, the river otter had to show up and be captured like a mugshot. And we also have evidence of rodent species. Now these, after carefully examining hundreds of little photos, I really strongly feel that these are Keen's mouse, which is a native deer mouse species, and not a rat species based on the size of the ears and the size of the body of the bird, of the mammal, sorry. And surprisingly, a wolf showed up. And this wolf obviously was attracted by the smell of the sardine can and proceeded to lie down and lick the juices off the can over a number of hours actually, and visited over several days, kept returning to have another taste of the delicious sardines. This camera really showed quite a few mammal species compared to the other 3 cameras. Coastal wolf, the river otter, and the Keen's mouse, and the only mammal it showed was a savanna sparrow. The other camera that was on the main Moore Island there, again, was well placed within the forest. And notice that the camera is off the ground on a emerging tree. That was how it was when it was first placed. Rhinoceros auklets were frequently captured on this camera as they were visiting their burrows in the interior of this island. And you can see there's a mouse species there that's captured as well. Again, I feel strongly this is not a rat species, but instead a mouse species. And a lovely wolf showed up in this camera as well. I feel this could be the same wolf as the other camera. It's the same island, only a few hundred meters away. And I don't doubt these wolves roam quite widely over these larger islands. And this wolf approached the camera and got a nice mug shot right there. And then proceeded to knock the camera over and still was able to capture some images of the wolf chewing the can, not swallowing it, because you can see it's remain the can right there, but obviously it felt it was squeezing all the juices out of the can there. So that camera revealed again those 3 mammal species, the wolf, the otter, and the mouse, and 3 bird species, which gives us a general picture of what the mammal community is on these islands. In total, we have nearly 10,000 photos taken from those 3 cameras, spanning 200 days, camera days of evidence. That's pretty good. Hopefully we can get some more data in this year, in 2020, from some of the other smaller islands, and maybe the North Moore Island, to see whether or not we can capture that again, and get a better picture of the general community on those islands. The good news is there were no invasive mammal species on those islands. At least we didn't find any, and further data in 2020 will help to confirm that. So I'd like to thank a number of people for making this study possible, primarily for the Kitatoo Guardians, for Fern and Ernie for doing a lot of the camera work, for Lara and the Coastal First Nations Great Barrier Initiative, helping partner on this project, and additional funding, obviously, from Environment Climate Change Canada, and to the climate community, for you guys for taking part in this webinar and finding out a bit more about what the kind of work we were doing on these islands was, and what we've revealed based on this camera data. Hopefully in 2020 we can get additional data, and hopefully I can visit your community at some point during the summer when the movement restrictions are lifted. Anyway, thank you very much for attending this, and I hope you found it valuable.